Ariella Blake sat at the dining table, her hands trembling slightly as she stared at the man across from her. Julian Carter, the man she'd loved quietly but deeply for almost a year. He looked as effortlessly polished as ever in his white dress shirt, sleeves rolled up, collar open. He ate in silence, and she couldn't stop replaying the words she needed to say. I'm pregnant with your child, Julian. She had whispered that line to herself 100 times. In the mirror, while folding laundry, even while grocery shopping. But now in his presence the words evaporated. Her eyes flicked to the untouched glass of red wine near her plate. She needed something strong to calm her nerves. Instead, she picked up her glass of chilled water and sipped, trying to steady the storm rising inside her. They had been lovers for almost a year. Surely that meant something, but Julian had always been hard to read. Charming, magnetic, but closed off emotionally. Still, tonight, something about him felt off, tense, as though he was dreading something too. Julian, she began quietly, we need to talk. Her voice was nearly swallowed by the soft clink of his silverware. He paused, then looked up. You're right, he said, rising suddenly from his seat. We do need to talk. Ariella blinked. His voice was sharper than usual. No warmth, no tenderness. Just finality. We can't keep going like this, he continued, his eyes dark. I'm getting married next month. The words crashed into her like an unexpected slap. To Vanessa Moreau. Her father's been a partner of mine for years. It's a strategic move, and it's already done. I hope you'll understand that whatever this was between us, it has to end. Ariella felt the air leave her lungs. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. I'm not abandoning you, Julian added, tone still cold. You can keep this place if you'd like, or I could sign over the beachfront house in Cape Town. My assistant's already handling the paperwork. He said it like a business deal, like she was just another transaction. And in that moment, Ariella Blake wanted to disappear. Ariella sat motionless long after Julian left the apartment. The only sound in the room was the soft ticking of the wall clock and the hum of the city beyond the balcony glass. She could still hear his voice in her head. You can keep the apartment or the beach house. It's already done. He hadn't even waited for her response. After delivering the news of his engagement like a press release, he simply buttoned his suit jacket and walked out, without so much as a glance back. Ariella rose slowly from her seat, her body numb. She wandered toward the floor-to-ceiling windows that gave a sweeping view of the Lagos skyline. From Banana Island, the world looked beautiful, untouchable, unaware of the storm raging inside her. Her hand instinctively went to her belly. She had planned to tell him tonight that inside her was the smallest version of him, a heartbeat already flickering on a scan, a life already forming. Now what? She pressed her forehead against the glass. The city lights blurred through her tears. He didn't even ask how she felt. He didn't even give her the chance to speak. It was all about his decision, his engagement, his apartment and beach house. The pain didn't hit like a wave. It sank in like slow poison. She hadn't even taken the pregnancy test out of her bag. It was still in her clutch, wrapped carefully in tissue. Was she really going to be a single mother? Her phone buzzed on the dining table, snapping her out of her thoughts. It was her best friend Alora texting, "How did it go? You told him?" Ariella didn't reply. She couldn't. She walked toward the bedroom and collapsed onto the bed without undressing. Her arms wrapped protectively around her midsection. A small tremble escaped her lips. Not because of the pregnancy, not because of the uncertainty, but because for the first time in a long time, she had loved someone who never once planned to love her back. Ariella stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror. Her eyes were tired, rimmed with dark circles that no concealer could hide. She hadn't gone to work in 3 days. Hadn't returned Elora's calls either. She just needed space to feel, to process, to plan. The pregnancy test lay open on the counter like a secret she had once tried to deny. Two bold pink lines stared back at her. Still positive. Still real. She reached for the small ultrasound envelope tucked inside her vanity drawer and slid out the black and white printout. A faint blur, barely a bean in shape, floated in a dark bubble. But it had a heartbeat. A future. Her future. Julian Carter didn't know, and now he never would. Not because she was angry. She was heartbroken, but not bitter. She just couldn't bring herself to hand over something so pure to a man who had reduced her to a transactional farewell. She walked to the kitchen and made herself a simple breakfast. Dry toast, water. Her body still rejected food some mornings, but she was adjusting. Everything was changing. Except one thing. She had decided she wouldn't take anything from him. Not the apartment, not the beach house in Cape Town, not even his name on the child's birth certificate. She would leave Banana Island. Quietly, discreetly. Her old flat in Lekki Phase 1 was still under her name. Smaller, simpler, and tucked in a quiet street with mango trees swaying outside the window. It had always been her safe place, long before Julian Carter. Before the luxury, before the heartbreak, she would return to that version of herself. Just then, her phone buzzed again. Elora. This time, Ariella picked up. "Babe, what's going on?" Elora's voice was a mixture of concern and frustration. "I've been calling for days." Ariella closed her eyes. "I'm okay, just overwhelmed." "Did you tell him?" Silence. "Rella?" Elora's voice softened. Ariella's lips trembled. "No, and I'm not going to." Elora paused. "You're serious?" "I can't tell a man he's going to be a father, right after he's told me he's marrying someone else." Elora let out a breath. "So, what now?" "I'm moving out," Ariella said quietly. "Today." Later that afternoon, she packed in silence. The driver Julian had arranged to be at her disposal was dismissed. Instead, she called a ride-hailing service. 2 suitcases, 1 handbag, a bundle of shattered dreams. She turned one last time toward the penthouse. The view, the marble floors, the life she almost had. Then she closed the door behind her. Not just to the apartment, to him. Ariella sat alone in the waiting room, her fingers gently clasped over the slight swell in her belly. The receptionist had just called her name, and she now lay on a plush, white examination table in a dimmed room, the soft scent of lavender oil trying to calm her nerves. She wasn't sure what scared her more, being a mother or being a mother alone. The sonographer entered, cheerful and efficient. "Let's take a look," she said warmly, applying the cool gel to Ariella's abdomen. Within moments, the screen came alive with gray ripples and soft beeps. "There it is," the sonographer smiled. "Strong heartbeat, healthy." Ariella's lips parted in awe. She had seen this before, but hearing the heartbeat again sent tears to her eyes. "And, wait," the woman paused, her tone changing. Ariella's chest tightened. "Miss Blake, there are 2 heartbeats." A stunned silence filled the room. "Twins," the sonographer confirmed with a smile. "You're carrying twins." Ariella's breath caught in her throat. Two of Julian Carter's children were growing inside her, and he didn't know. Would never know if she had her way. Tears slipped silently down her cheek. Not from fear this time, but from a love so intense it cracked her open. After the scan, she walked out of the clinic in a daze, clutching the black envelope that now carried a snapshot of her destiny. 2 little beings, curved like commas, inside her womb. She didn't go home immediately. She wandered into a quiet cafe and sat by the window, staring out at the slow hum of equi traffic. Mothers passed by with strollers. Men in fine suits clicked their car remotes. And for the first time in weeks, she wasn't afraid. These children were hers. They were her beginning, not her ending. Meanwhile, Julian sat in his darkened study, staring blankly at the fireplace. His engagement party was in 2 weeks. Vanessa Moreau had practically taken over his life. redesigning his home, managing media press releases, even coordinating brand synergy with her fashion line. But all he could think about was Ariella. Why had she gone so quietly? Why hadn't she taken the apartment or the beach house? Why hadn't she fought? Every time he tried to convince himself it was for the best, her absence echoed louder. She had vanished without a word. No closure, no accusations, no goodbye. And that haunted him more than anything else. Back in Lekki Phase 1, Ariella placed the scanned photos on her nightstand. She lit a candle and whispered to the room, "I don't need him. I just need you two." And with that, a quiet peace settled in her chest. The world didn't need to know yet. But someday, maybe someday, they would. Julian stood at the edge of the balcony, staring out into the Lagos skyline as twilight bled into the horizon. His mind had known peace in weeks. Since Ariella left, everything had become noise. Vanessa's voice, her decorators, her social media team, her image consultations. His phone buzzed again. Vanessa. Vanessa Moreau, daughter of Henri Moreau, his French-Nigerian business partner, and one of the most powerful oil magnates on the continent. Their engagement had been arranged for years. Strategic, clean, on paper, it was perfect. But nothing about it felt right. And ever since Ariella disappeared, it felt suffocating. He picked up the call. "Jules," Vanessa said with a playful pout in her voice, "why haven't you confirmed your tux fitting for the engagement soiree?" "I've been busy," he replied flatly. "Well, make time," she snapped, quickly shifting tones. "The media will be there. So will my investors." Of course they would. That's all this engagement was to her, a well-orchestrated business campaign. He hung up before she could keep talking. And then he made a call of his own. "Find out where she went," Julian told his head of private security, Ariella Blake. "She left the apartment weeks ago and hasn't contacted me since. I want to know where she's staying. If she's okay, discreetly." His guard gave a tight nod. "Consider it done." He didn't know why he was doing this. She had walked away. He was about to get married. But it was gnawing at him. What if something had happened? What if she had left because of something he said? He did. What if there was more? Ariella was adjusting. Her mornings were filled with prenatal vitamins and mood swings. The nausea was less frequent now. She worked remotely as a branding consultant, taking only select clients. Nothing too demanding. Just enough to keep the lights on. Elora visited almost daily, bringing homemade food and distractions. But one evening, Elora came with something else. "I saw Vanessa Moreau at VCP Mall," she said carefully. "She was drunk, loud, arguing with someone on the phone, and I overheard something." Ariella looked up from her tea. She said, and I quote, "Let Julian marry me first. He can find out later that I had the abortion." Ariella blinked. "What?" "She was pregnant," Elora whispered. "She terminated it. And now she's trying to pin the engagement tighter so her father doesn't find out." Ariella sat back in her chair, stunned. She had never judged Vanessa before. She hadn't even blamed her. Julian had made his choice. But this was twisted. Vanessa had willingly given up the child Julian never knew existed, while Ariella was carrying two of his, in secret. Julian's guard returned with an update. "She's staying in Lekki, moved into a small flat 2 weeks ago, lives alone, no male visitors. She works from home, but what? She's pregnant, sir, and visibly far along." Julian's heart stopped. His throat tightened. His pulse roared in his ears. Without a word, he grabbed his car keys. Julian drove like a man possessed. The night Lagos traffic barely slowed him down. His driver had offered to take the wheel, but he refused. He needed to feel the engine, the motion, the tension vibrating through every bone in his body. She was pregnant, and she hadn't said a word. The Lekki address was in a quiet cul-de-sac, modest compared to what Ariella had grown accustomed to in Banana Island. But something about the narrow road and leafy trees felt peaceful, grounded. He parked 2 houses away and walked the rest of the way. Saw there was light in her window, warm, yellow, and inviting. He knocked twice, heart pounding. Ariella opened the door slowly. For a moment, she didn't say anything. Her face went blank. Her hand rested gently on the curve of her belly, which was now undeniable. Her body had changed, and it looked beautiful. Full, strong, alive. Julian didn't speak either. He just stared. At her. At the soft cotton dress that clung to her bump. At the faint swelling of her face. At everything he had missed. "How did you find me?" she asked, her voice quiet. "I had to," he replied. Silence stretched between them. Heavy. Unforgiving. "You're pregnant," he said, though it came out more like a question. A fragile thread of disbelief hung in the air. "Yes." His chest rose. "Why didn't you tell me?" Ariella stepped back, allowing him in. The apartment was small but warm. A single candle flickered on the table. A baby scan was pinned to a corkboard beside her desk. "You didn't exactly give me space to speak that night, Julian. You sat there, told me you were marrying Vanessa, offered me real estate like compensation, and walked out." He winced. He remembered every moment of that night, but hearing it from her lips stripped the arrogance from his chest. "I didn't know," he whispered. "I didn't think you'd—" "Keep the baby?" she finished for him. "You don't know me as well as you think." He looked at her again. This time really looked. "And it's not just one," she added, walking to the kitchen counter and placing a small photo in his hand. The sonogram. 2 shapes. 2 tiny heartbeats. His eyes widened. "Twins!" Ariella nodded, her chin trembling. Julian sat down slowly, like the weight of it all finally pressed him into the earth. "God!" "I wasn't going to tell you," she admitted, folding her arms across her chest. "But not out of spite. I didn't want to raise them around a man who saw me as an inconvenience, who gave up on me that easily." He didn't defend himself. He couldn't. "Vanessa isn't pregnant," he said finally. "She was. She ended it. Her father doesn't know. The engagement was never about love. It was a business deal. One I let happen because I thought I didn't deserve anything more." Ariella swallowed hard. "And now? I know I was wrong." She turned her face slightly, blinking away emotion. She didn't know what was harder, keeping him out of her life or letting him back in. "I'm not asking to be your savior," he said, rising, "but I am their father, and I want to be in their lives. Yours too, if you'll let me." Ariella looked at him, unsure of what to say. Everything hurt, everything healed. All at once. "I need time," she said. Julian nodded, stepping backward toward the door. "I'll wait, however long it takes." And then he left. But this time he didn't feel like he was walking away. He felt like he had finally come home. Ariella closed the door gently after Julian left, then leaned her back against it. The silence felt heavier than ever, pressing down on her chest. Her hands instinctively cradled her belly, as if shielding her babies from the chaos outside. She had meant what she said. She needed time, but more than that, she needed space. Space to breathe, space to raise her children without drama, space to rediscover who she was outside of heartbreak and broken promises. Julian's return stirred something deep in her. Anger, longing, confusion, but not trust. That had died the day he walked away with a cold goodbye and a beach house offer like she was some kept woman. Twins or not, she couldn't just erase the damage. The next morning, she woke to the sound of her phone vibrating. A message from Elora. "He showed up at my office asking how you're doing. Ariella, he's not going to disappear quietly." She tossed the phone aside. And by noon, she found a sleek box at her door. Inside was a handcrafted baby journal with 2 tiny footprints embossed in gold. No note, just silence speaking loudly. "Ma," she pushed it aside. 3 days passed. Then he came again. She heard the knock this time and didn't answer. Her windows were closed, her lights dimmed. She stood behind the curtain and watched him wait, 30 whole minutes before he walked back to his car. No messages, no calls. She was glad he didn't beg, because if he did, she might have broken. But she wouldn't. The next day he sent baby supplies, diapers, formula, organic stretch mark oil, even a soft pink and gray blanket with A and B embroidered into the corner. She returned the box to the delivery man. Another day passed, and this time it was a note. I don't deserve forgiveness, but I'm still here. Every day. Jay. She stared at the note until her hands shook, then tore it in two. Elora dropped by that evening with pastries and concern in her eyes. He's trying, Rella. And it's not enough, Ariella said, her voice like steel. He's trying because he knows he lost something valuable, not because he loved me enough in the first place. There's a difference. Elora sat beside her and rubbed her back. Do you still love him? Ariella didn't answer. She just exhaled and looked down at her belly, gently rubbing the curve where her children were growing. I love them, she said, and that's enough. And she meant it. Julian Carter could stand in the rain every day for a year, but love, once shattered, didn't glue back the same way, especially not when the break was as deep as hers. It had been nearly a month since Julian showed up at her door. Since then, he hadn't knocked again. No flowers, no gifts, no more luxury gestures. He had stopped trying to impress her with things, and somehow that silence made more noise than anything else. Ariella didn't expect the absence to affect her, but it did. She hated it. She hated that a part of her still paused at the sound of a car pulling into the street, that she still checked her phone, hoping not for grand apologies, but for a message as simple as, "How are you feeling today?" But nothing came. Still, she pushed through. Her days were filled with appointments, nesting, and slow walks in the shaded corners of Lekki. The twins had grown heavier, and she could feel the tightness in her back and hips now. Everything ached. But she welcomed it. The discomfort made her feel closer to the life she was building. She was in the middle of folding baby onesies when her phone rang. Unknown caller. She almost didn't pick up. Hello? Miss Blake? A woman's voice came through, careful and urgent. I'm sorry to call out of the blue. I'm Julian's assistant. You don't know me, but... Ariella's heart skipped. He collapsed in the office this morning. They rushed him to Lagoon Hospital. He's stable, but he's been asking for you. Ariella didn't move, didn't speak. He hasn't eaten in days, barely sleeps. He said he would understand if you didn't come, but I just thought you should know. The line went dead. Ariella stood frozen in the center of her small living room, baby clothes scattered like clouds at her feet. She didn't owe him anything. She had made her choice. But her body was already reaching for her shoes. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and silence. She hated it immediately. The nurse at the front desk led her upstairs to a private room. When she stepped in, she almost didn't recognize him. Julian looked thinner, dark circles under his eyes, an IV taped to his hand. He was awake but pale, his energy muted. When his eyes met hers, he tried to sit up but winced. Don't, she said quickly, walking to his side. Just stay still. You came, he murmured, voice hoarse. I came because someone called me, she replied, folding her arms. Don't read too much into it. He smiled faintly. I wouldn't dare. She sat, unsure of what to do with her hands. The room was quiet, save for the beeping monitor. I didn't know how else to prove I meant what I said, he whispered. Everything I ever gave you was material. It was easy. Money's easy. What I never gave you was me, my vulnerability, my honesty. Ariella's lips trembled. I didn't need your guilt. I needed your presence, your heart. And when you had the chance, you chose everything but me. I know, he said, eyes wet. And I'm not asking for a second chance. I just wanted to see you again. And thank you for giving me something I didn't deserve. Our children. She looked away, fighting the ache in her throat. You're not a bad man, Julian, she said quietly. You're just a man who made a selfish choice. And I'm doing everything I can not to let it define me or them. I understand. Silence returned, heavy and raw. Then she stood. I'm glad you're okay, she said. And before she could second-guess herself, she left. Back in the cab, she cradled her belly and whispered to the twins, I love you, and I'm going to give you the world, even if I have to do it alone. But somewhere in her chest, a crack had opened. Not from weakness, but from remembering that even pain, when met with sincerity, has the power to soften. It had been 2 weeks since the hospital visit. Ariella hadn't heard from Julian since. No calls, no texts, no gifts. It was as though the silence between them had grown into a respectful distance. And oddly, it made her feel lighter. Until the knock came. It was early evening. Rain had just started to fall, drumming softly against the roof. Ariella opened the door slowly, and there he stood. Julian Carter. Soaked. Not in a tailored suit or polished shoes this time, but in a plain gray hoodie, jeans, and sneakers. No umbrella, no driver in sight. Just him, clutching a folded piece of paper in his hand, hair drenched, eyes swollen with something far deeper than regret. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. I need 5 minutes, he said, his voice cracking. She stepped aside without a word. Julian didn't sit. He stood there in the middle of her small living room, water dripping from his sleeves, hands trembling slightly. I've been trying to figure out how to say this for weeks, he began, his voice raw. But every version I rehearsed felt like an excuse. So I'm just going to tell you the truth. Ariella's arms folded across her chest as she braced herself. When I told you I was marrying Vanessa, it wasn't about her. It wasn't even about the partnership. It was about control. I've spent my whole life building an empire that no one could take from me. I thought if I aligned myself with someone powerful, if I made the smart choice, I wouldn't lose anything. I wouldn't get hurt. His voice cracked. Because I've lost before. He looked down. My mother walked out on my father when I was 10. No warning, no explanation. Just a note on the kitchen table and an empty closet. He never recovered. I watched him rot from the inside out. He turned into someone cold, paranoid, controlling. And he raised me to believe that love was weakness. That attachment made men stupid. Julian's chest rose and his eyes filled again. So when I met you, and I started feeling things I couldn't control, I panicked. I told myself it was just temporary, physical, that I could walk away if I needed to. But then you started making it feel like home. And I didn't know how to let that in without feeling like I'd lose everything. Tears slipped down his cheeks now, quiet and without shame. I hurt you. I betrayed what we had. And then I tried to buy your silence with property. Because that's what I was taught. Money fixes everything. He took a breath. But it doesn't fix what I broke in you. And I know that now. He unfolded the paper in his hand and placed it on her table. It was a signed document, legal. Parental rights waiver. No demands, no claims. I'm not here to force my way in. I just wanted you to know the truth. And I want our children to know one thing, that their father may have failed, but he tried to make it right. Ariella's throat tightened. Julian slowly sank to his knees, right there on the floor, rain-soaked, broken, weeping. I'm sorry, Ariella, for everything. If I have to stand outside this door every day just to prove I mean it, I will. I love those babies more than I've loved anything in this life, and I haven't even met them yet. He looked up, eyes red. I don't want your forgiveness today. I just want you to know that I see it now. All of it. What I did, what I lost, what I still want to become, for them. Ariella couldn't speak, couldn't move. She had waited months for some kind of explanation. But she never expected this. Not Julian Carter on his knees. Not tears. Not truth. She took a slow breath and finally walked toward him. She didn't speak. She simply knelt too, right in front of him, and placed his hand gently on her belly. They're kicking, she whispered, voice trembling. Julian let out a breathless sob, his forehead dropping to her lap. arms wrapping protectively around her growing stomach, as though it was all he had left in the world. And for a few sacred minutes, there were no past mistakes. Just two broken people, and the promise of something better. The soft buzz of fluorescent lights filled the labor ward, mixing with muffled footsteps and the distant sounds of heart monitors. The scent of antiseptic lingered in the air, crisp and cold. Ariella lay in the hospital bed, her breathing steady but labored, her hands gripping the white sheets with every contraction that rippled through her body. It was time. The nurses moved around her efficiently, checking vitals and adjusting the IV. One of them smiled warmly. "You're doing great, sweetheart. Almost there." Ariella barely heard her. Her mind was somewhere else. Everywhere else. She had come here alone. No calls, no fuss. Just her and the overnight bag she'd packed weeks ago. She hadn't told Alora, hadn't told Julian. She just wanted it to be simple. Quiet. Until one of the nurses returned and gently placed a hand on her arm. "There's a man outside, asking if he can come in. Julian Carter. Should I send him away?" Ariella closed her eyes. Her heart tightened. She didn't answer right away. Then came another contraction, a strong one, and through the haze of pain and fear, she heard her own voice whisper, "Let him in." The door creaked open a few minutes later, and Julian stepped inside slowly, almost unsure if he was dreaming. He looked exhausted, his shirt wrinkled, his eyes swollen. But when he saw her, his entire body softened. He walked quietly to her side and, without asking, took her hand. She didn't pull away. He didn't speak. He just held her hand and placed his other palm gently over her belly. And when the next contraction came, he stayed through it. Steady, silent, solid. Hours passed. The pain grew sharper. The nurses moved faster. A doctor entered and checked her progress. And then it was time. Ariella was wheeled into the delivery room. Julian followed in scrubs, silent but present. He stood beside her as she screamed, cried, pushed. He wiped her forehead, kissed her hand. He whispered her name when she thought she couldn't go on. And he was the first to see the moment her world split open with life. A high-pitched cry pierced the room. Then another. 2 babies. 2 miracles. A girl first, then a boy. Tears streamed down Ariella's cheeks. Her body trembled, empty now, but full of something greater. Love, relief, wonder. Julian held their daughter in his arms while a nurse swaddled their son. His lips trembled as he stared down at the tiny face. Eyes shut, fists curled. He looked at Ariella. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for not shutting me out, for letting me be here." Ariella nodded, her voice too hoarse to reply. But her eyes said it all. She hadn't forgiven him fully. But she had opened the door. And that mattered. Later, in the quiet of the private recovery room, the twins lay sleeping between them. Julian sat on the couch, gently rocking their daughter while Ariella cradled their son, eyes half closed from exhaustion. No words passed between them. There was no need. The babies had already begun rewriting everything. 6 months later, the beach in Alash was quiet. The waves lapped gently against the sand, and the late afternoon sun cast golden light across the water. Ariella sat on a soft white blanket, her sundress fluttering in the breeze as she fed her son from a bottle. Her daughter slept peacefully beside her in a carrier, tiny fingers curled like shells. They had come here often lately, her, the babies, and Julian. Not as a couple, not yet, but as a family trying to build something honest. Julian was just returning from the beach house with a cooler bag slung over his shoulder. He walked barefoot across the sand, sleeves rolled up, and a soft smile playing on his lips. "You should try the juice," he said, handing her a bottle. "It's the only one the twins didn't scream at when I tested it." Ariella chuckled. "So now you test baby juice?" "I do whatever my bosses demand," he said, nodding toward the twins. She gave him a look. "They own you already." He didn't argue. He sat beside her, close but not too close, and watched their daughter sleep. "You're doing amazing, Ari," he said softly. "They're lucky to have you." She looked at him then, really looked. And for the first time in a long time, she saw the man he'd become. Not the billionaire, not the broken lover, but the father who showed up every day, with burp cloths, with humility, with love. "Thanks," she said. "You're not so bad either." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was calm, gentle. After a moment, Julian reached into his pocket and pulled out a small envelope. "Before you panic, no, it's not a ring," he smirked. She narrowed her eyes. Inside was a folded card. She opened it slowly and read, "A proposal for our future terms, no expectations, just trust, one day at a time. With love, signed, Julian, Ariella, and 2 tiny CEOs in training." Her throat tightened. Laughter bubbled behind the tears. "No pressure," he said. "I'm not asking for forever. I'm just asking to walk with you while we figure it out." Ariella looked out at the sea, at the way the sun turned everything gold, and then back at him. "Okay," she said softly, "one day at a time." He exhaled like he'd been holding that breath for months. And there on a quiet beach in Lagos, with 2 tiny heartbeats between them, and the past finally behind them, they began again. Not as perfect strangers, not as broken exes, but as something brand new, something real. The garden behind their Victoria Island home was blooming. Lavender bushes swayed beside flowering hibiscus, and the early morning sun spilled through the trees like melted gold. A soft breeze carried the scent of fresh-cut grass and baby lotion. Ariella stood barefoot on the patio in a soft ivory robe, cradling her daughter against her hip while watching her son waddle clumsily through the grass, arms outstretched toward a bubble floating lazily in the air. Their laughter was the soundtrack of her mornings now. Inside, Julian hummed to himself in the kitchen as he prepared breakfast. Real breakfast. Not takeout, not catered. Omelets, fruit slices, little bowls of cereal with tiny plastic spoons. Fatherhood had transformed him. He was still Julian Carter, CEO, billionaire, investor, but now board meetings paused for diaper changes. Business trips were rescheduled for birthdays, and his favorite title wasn't on a magazine cover anymore. It was taped to the fridge in messy crayon, Dada. Ariella smiled as he stepped outside, 2 mugs in hand. He handed her one and kissed her temple. "Did our son eat a flower again?" he asked, nodding toward their boy, who now had hibiscus petals sticking to his chin. "He might have," Ariella laughed. "He has your appetite. And your reckless joy," Julian said, sliding an arm around her waist. They stood there for a moment, just watching. No chaos, no past, no pain. Just the family they had built. Imperfect, healing, alive. "Can I ask you something?" he said softly. Ariella looked up at him, heart already thudding. He pulled a tiny velvet box from the pocket of his pajama shorts. No fanfare, no speeches. Just a simple, open box with a modest gold band and a single diamond shaped like a teardrop. "Will you marry me this time? Not because of the babies, not because of the past, but because we've built something too sacred to lose?" She blinked, then laughed softly, tears pooling in her eyes. "It took you a year. I wanted to get it right." She kissed him, and that was her answer. Their son clapped. Their daughter squealed. And as they stood there in their quiet garden, barefoot and surrounded by bubbles, Julian Carter finally got the one thing he had never been able to buy: a real forever home.